Yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, I'm trans. Yes, I'm talking about it today. Super non-controversial video today, guys. Nothing too spicy, nothing that should, cause any.
I find it interesting though that she is calling out, was that Nancy Mace or Lauren Boebert or one of them? No, I think that might have been Christy. No, I don't know. They've all fucking done that. They've all fucking sent things over to Israel. I find it interesting that she's calling that out specifically.
I'm sure no emotions will rise up from any of this. So let's just jump right in. A lot of people have a lot of feelings, questions, opinions that I was not always a Christian. It's been about a 1.5 to 2 year journey now at this point, and it's something that is super deeply personal and something that I have refrained myself from talking a lot about.
When people say that it's a personal journey, this is something we saw with Tucker Carlson, where personal journey becomes for me synonymous with not knowing shit, with kind of just deciding to pivot and making Christianity your new aesthetic or your new public persona, or an element of the way that they put on performance for a public persona. And I find it fascinating because I'm wondering if she's going to talk about, like, oh, reading the Bible every night and just being enraptured and finding like all the same shit I've heard dozens of times before. Because when we covered like the hate church and shit, we, being knee deep into this Christian conservative ideology.
I do have a disclaimer though, a few things that I am not in this video. I am not an expert on Christianity or the Bible. I am not a biblical scholar. I am not a preacher.
Chat. What did I say? I don't miss. I don't know. I don't miss. What did I just say about not knowing the Bible and about this being the personal journey being used to cover it up? Like, so if this is something, let's pick apart the argument here, or pick apart what she's saying, because it's not even an argument. She's just saying, I've been working on this for a long time. So if you convert to a religion or you pick up a religion, generally what would happen if you are serious about that religion and its tenets and not just the vague vibe and aesthetic of being like trad or whatever the fuck, you learn a lot about it. You immerse yourself in the history and the theology, the theological studies that have between, Abrahamic religions like Judaism and all of the Catholicism and like all of this other shit. There is a lot to Christianity. Yet it is not surprising, because it is so often used as just an aesthetic. It is not surprising that people arrive most popularly in America, and especially American Christianity, at this kind of formless brand of evangelicalism, where it comes down to vibes rather than an actual foundational or structurally supported theology. Yeah, I remember when Russell Brand suddenly started talking about being a Christian right before the allegations came out. Yes, I think it's I don't know if there's allegations against Blaire, but like I think it's probably more just going with the flow. And especially when you're in these spaces, when you're in these conservative spaces, there is a lot of groupthink. There is a lot of orthodoxy around like being Christian. But it's why it's this vague aestheticism where you don't see a lot of delineation where, like, okay, so say, for example, you go to the hate church and you talk about Catholics being trad cath. The hate church are full of very dumb people, but they believe what they believe. They know what they believe, and they'll be able to tell you why they think Catholics are apostate, why they think they're against God, why they think it's not biblical and it's not structurally or found scripturally sound teaching to go with Catholicism, right? Now, you take that same approach with any trad cath, Nick Fuentes Groiper fan with a Crusader LARPing avatar on Twitter. Ask the difference between Catholicism and like a Southern Baptist church. They will not be able to tell you the first fucking thing about doctrinal differences between, like, do you accept Jesus as your personal savior? Are you freed through works, or do you just get freed through the salvation of Christ, and you don't need to do works to gain the redeeming blood of the Lamb, or like whatever the fuck, and it is in this mire that people like Blaire White and Tucker Carlson freely walk into, because they can just say that they're Christian and then get a whole swath of people who are ideologically similarly not discerning, but will just hear Christian, and they flock to it because they understand this almost unspoken truth in conservative circles, that it's better to be some brand of Christian than not. And that includes like Mormonism. Like when I was growing up, here's a good example. When I was growing up, Mormonism was treated like a cult. I grew up Lutheran, right? And the doctrinal differences foundationally between Mormonism, which your Mormonism is a cult, but the differences in doctrine are so stark. The shit that Joseph Smith said, and this is not talking about the actual goddamn history of the real Mormon church, which is something I might actually get back to a video on that, because they're fascinating stories of the like murders and land grabs, and like the history of the Mormon church is wild. I think part of this fragmenting along these ideological lines for American evangelical Christianity, really, I started to notice it when I realized how many prominent American conservatives were Mormon, and how many people didn't make a distinction between different beliefs, right? Because as a kid, I wasn't allowed to go to like a friend's church if it wasn't Lutheran, because my mom was like, well, I don't know what you're going to be taught there. Like that's how seriously evangelicals, or at least the sect I was in, took this shit. And now you don't have that. At least not broadly. So I'm very curious what I'm making a prediction that Blaire is going to be, maybe she has a church, but I kind of doubt it. I think it is going to be a personal journey with God, which just mostly means a completely unguided tour through rhetoric that she is unqualified, unknowledgeable of, to be able to interpret and then apply to her life. Because there is stuff in the Bible. This is not me shitting all over religion. Sure, if you want to be a Christian, God bless you. There is stuff in the Bible that can be useful for building a life around, for building community around. There are positive messages to be gleaned. The problem with being a conservative influencer and just picking up a Bible is you come into it with an entire worldview that has already been stapled to, where it serves more as a manual for a set of justifications for your morality, of exclusion, of oppression, of several other things. And that's what it becomes for so many people. It becomes a justification rather than an actual coherent worldview or theology.
I'm aware that there are no trans people on the internet almost at all talking about being Christian or religious at all, for that matter, on the internet. Similar to how when I started my channel, there were no trans people talking about right-wing values or being somewhere, other than the radical far left on the political spectrum. And I find that kind of sad, because the idea that Christianity is, or religion is, somehow separate from being gay or trans is something that I've definitely seen my whole life. A lot of gay and trans people feel like they are so far removed from having access to that. They feel a lot of resentment towards, religious establishment. They feel a lot of forsakenness. They feel forsaken by the church, forsaken by God, forsaken by the Bible. Today's video is sponsored by Merge Cooking, the cozy merge game where I can actually de-stress, relax.
Jesus Christ. That's crazy work. That is crazy work.
For a long time, I felt like I had to be an expert, or I had to have it all figured out. And then I realized, the further I learned, no one has it figured out, and no one knows what they're talking about. As far as I'm concerned, as long as the whole world is debating everything about it, I don't have to have it all figured out to sit here and just be.
So that's actually kind of fascinating. Because she's not wrong, right? Like, you can look at the mass of Christianity, and I was just discussing this. Like, there are so many myriad doctrinal differences, but I have a sneaking suspicion. I don't want to let her off the hook too quickly, because I have a sneaking suspicion this is going to be used to simply justify being a quote-unquote trans Christian by identifying with an ideology that on one hand benefits her to have on her side, which is American Christianity, and on the other hand widely vilifies people just like her. Also, AI overviewing, there are over 45,000 Christian denominations globally. You can't scroll down. Like, there's a little link right here that you can usually find a source at. You can't like dig just a little bit. All right, fine. Girl, you put out like one video every 2 months. What the fuck are you? Oh.
Guys, for me, finding Christianity, finding God has been the most transformational, profound, empowering thing that's occurred.
Now, look, I understand that somebody might be going through a great internal journey. But Blaire, can you really say it's the most transformational phase or most transformational thing that's ever happened? Can you really say this has been the most transformational?
So a lot of you guys may remember a few years ago, I was on the Roseanne Barr podcast, and we had a really funny, but real, at least to me, moment where I was telling her, I feel like I'm being called to God, but I don't really know how to get there intellectually. I'll put the clip in. It's super funny. I want to believe in God, actually, but I don't really know how.
Look up through your eye sockets as far as you can. Look all the way up to where your head hurts or your eyes strain. Your eyes way up there. Breathe in. Contain it.
Again, when I started talking about this, I called attention to similarity between Tucker Carlson, who is somebody else who has kind of taken on this. Well, I have a very personal relationship with Jesus, and I'm not a theologian or anything by any measure. But doesn't God call us to do like if you listen to any of his shit, it is the same thin veneer of Christian aesthetics. But one of his big inciting incidents that we talked about, we talked about it when it came out because it is one of the most insane videos I've ever seen. The thing that Tucker claimed was his road to Damascus moment, I guess. The thing that made him really believe was being, quote unquote, being attacked by a demon, which if you actually just go back and listen to that interview, it was very clearly like his dog scratched him in the middle of the night or something. Because he just goes and he talks about, and there were these claw marks that were just left on me, and there was no reasonable explanation that I could come up with. So I came to the conclusion that it must have been some kind of divine intervention. Or this is likewise a deeply stupid inciting incident to hold up as this is one of the things that really sent me on my journey. When you are sitting with somebody as wackadoo cuckoo banana pants as Roseanne Barr, and you are told to just look up until your eyes hurt, and that was the thing that made you go, damn, I think God actually might be real. There are so many little things that, and it's don't think that I'm saying that, oh, this is all conservatives. Because it happens on the left too. Unfortunately, it happens with libs, it happens with everybody. But there are little tiny moments where somebody will say something that reveals so much about their character. And the only real thing I can draw away from it is that, oh, you are just deeply dumb. Like not as in you are, or you are unintelligent, so to speak, but that you just have no curiosity to pursue that further, to interrogate yourself about why you might accept this so readily.
And I feel like if you've had a spiritual awakening, I feel like you get that. And I'm not trying to use language that isn't, familiar to people who aren't spiritual or haven't had that moment or whatever, but you know what I mean if you know what I mean.
Spiritual also seems like a little bit of a slip up. Because spiritual is a term that you'll hear a lot in these kind of, because there's this weird implaceable ideology that has evolved from this kind of pick and choose buffet line evangelical, like vague Christianity, where people will take the shit that they want and use the Bible to justify believing that. But then because there are so many other aspects at play in the modern world that go against things, the big actually fedora wearing atheist like Reddit argument is always like, did you know about the one that the verse that says you're actually not supposed to eat shellfish or wear mixed fabrics? Checkmate, Christians. And it's like, yeah, but Christians have been doing that, and it has been all but encouraged by, again, this kind of big group hug sentimentality where it's like, oh, you just believe in Jesus? Doesn't matter if it's as your Lord and Savior, or if you need to come and accept Christ, or you can only gain redemption through works. Like, doesn't matter the major foundational doctrinal differences. Doctrinal differences people have died and killed over in the past. That shit, throw it all out of the airlock, because you can just kind of say, no, actually, I just dislike gay people because of this one verse that I've been told about online, or I just think that, some other bullshit that they use to justify stuff. They just pick and choose things that ends up with people. You end up with this weird phenomenon where like 30-year-old wine Jesus, but then will also have crystals for good energy. Or will believe in like mediums or shit like that. And it's like, we've gotten to this weird grab bag religion that is so incoherent a lot of the times. And the thing I find fascinating about her, to wrap all this around to why I originally stopped the video, the thing I find fascinating about her specifically being like, oh, well, the people who don't understand spirituality, is that it's usually just placed under this broad banner of like, oh no, I'm not really religious, because people understand that like being religious means some kind of church body, being part of some kind of congregation. So they say, I'm not religious, I'm just more spiritual, right? You see that, you see that shit a lot. Have you been talking to my mother? Oh, your mom too, huh? Yeah, and honestly, somebody in the chat saying cherry picking hate crap from the Bible is lazy and ill-motivated. It's so fucking, like, it's me, Swag, and thank you for following. The reason that I have no respect for, like, the trad cat, dipshit, online crusader meme groypers is that they just have, like, they aren't about that shit, Like, and that really, I don't respect a lot of people. But if somebody is about that shit, even if I loathe who they are as a person, I can at least respect that. That's why I don't respect Nick Fuentes at any level. I will never miss a chance to throw disdain on that little shit's name, because he is a duplicitous little slinking rat of a human being. He is a slug who will say whatever is most advantageous to him at a moment, and when he's called out on the shit he actually believes, will double back and be like, well, no, I didn't actually say this, and like, he's just a fucking pussy. Stand by the shit you believe if you believe it. That's my firm belief. And it goes into why I am so against, like, so many of these trad cat LARPers, is that they don't go to fucking mass. They don't go to actual church. They pass around crusader memes in their little Discord chats that they make with AI and put anime girls and cat girls into it to, like, somehow try and weld their already poisoned internet brain ideology to the vague aesthetics of being some kind of traditionalist or moral fighter. And it's honestly just kind of a hop, skip, and a jump from what I'm assuming, what I think. We're going to watch the rest of it, but where I think Blaire is going to go.
And around that time period, I reached out to God and I said, please, explain to me why I'm feeling this pull. Tell me what this means. And if you felt the pull, again, you know what I'm saying. And I said, I don't know how to logically get there that you're real. I was super like, literal and physicalist about it. I was like, if you could just give me not a sign, I don't want something, fuzzy or something that is kind of enigmatic or not tangible. I want you to prove to me that you're not only like real, but like there's a point to me talking to you like this. There's a point to me feeling like I can communicate with you. I had what I can only describe as a supernatural experience. And yet it was so tangible at the same time. It was so literal at the same time, yet impossible, yet.
So one of the things I have always found fascinating about these kind of come to Jesus stories, because, and this is the thing. So I mentioned earlier, I was raised Lutheran. And one of the things we learned about was the history of Martin Luther, and really all through his life. One of the things that happened to him is that he was, before he became a monk, because he was a Catholic monk before he nailed the 95 Theses on the church door and spoke out against indulgences and all that shit. He had a moment, I'm trying to remember the basics of it, but the way it was taught to us is that he was going to school to become a doctor or a lawyer or some other profession that, every parent wanted their kid to do in whenever the fuck Germany, 1600s, I don't remember. They got caught in a storm in the road and he hid under a tree that was split in half by lightning. And this is my vague recollection from shit I learned in like, not kindergarten, but like probably second, third grade, like really early. And the way that the story was told, that he prayed to God in that thunderstorm, that if God helped him or delivered him, he would quit going to school and become a monk, dedicate his life to Christ. 95 Theses was early 1500s. I knew it was 100 years, give or take. And so what ended up, the way that is kind of taught to kids, 15, 17, hell yeah, thank you, is that, okay, he basically had a moment very much like this with God. Like this was his great calling to religion, to serve God and to be a man of God and worship and interpret the scripture, and God used him and blah blah blah. But the thing that sticks out to me about that story now is that he thought he was going to die, right? And this was at a time when you do believe it, like God and religion is just like still relatively accepted, right? We hadn't reached peak post-enlightenment where people are like, oh, God is dead and all that shit. So I think about that whenever I hear a story about coming to Jesus. And when you hear about, because you'll hear about stories of, fucking go watch the 700 Club or go watch any of those like old 80s, 90s. I've seen a number of them via Fundy Fridays and the stuff that they do over there, where you will have these stories about people, being awakened and seeing the light. And when you look into them, or if you read between the lines of things they're saying, they were already at a point in their life where either shit was really bad, but more likely than anything, they were already at a point in their life where they were susceptible to the idea of God, susceptible to the idea of religion. And in Blaire's case, I can only speculate, but I think, that probably has something to do with the fact she's probably been chatted up by other conservatives in the movement talking about Christ, probably been proselytized to by other people in these spaces. So it is not like the idea of there being this big moment, where God came to me, or I feel that he spoke directly to me, or all this stuff, to me means less than nothing. Because if you are at the point, generally speaking, where you are talking to God, you have already entertained a worldview where God exists, where God wants to have a relationship with you. You have already engaged in the fundamentals of the Christian worldview, where you have this direct back and forth relationship with God. And it doesn't, like, you have already convinced yourself of this being real. So the idea of then going and being like, damn, this shit, I don't know how to tell everybody this, but it was real to me, is like, yeah, of course it was. Because you're already open to the idea of it being real. One of the things as humans we do is recognize patterns where people, it's you gotta be careful with how you say it. It's like, oh no, I'm just recognizing patterns. I'm just pointing stuff out. I'm just noticing things. But that is based in the truth that like humans are pattern recognizing animals. It's how we pass things down. It's how a lot of dumbass shit gets disseminated. But at the end of the day, like we do still want to see things even when they might not be there, because it is easier to contemplate something. And this just goes back to basic cognition. It is easier for us to process something that is more familiar.
That it was exactly what I asked for and needed for. And I felt like my entire, third eye opened, or my spiritual life opened at that moment. And I didn't know where that was necessarily headed. I actually, even at the time, wasn't necessarily set on that means the Christian God of the Christian Bible. But that is where I felt called after that moment, which changed my life forever. And I think I'm going to keep some of those specific details to myself, because it is so deeply personal and so mind-bending, and so I'm still unpacking in a lot of ways.
She just had a moment. She just had a personal moment. Slappy meats. It was so profound. It's so based and true, but it's a secret. Yeah, like literally hand waving the whole experience. Great. Read. Love it.
You see so many people using religion, all religions, to justify heinous things. You see people not living through, the biblical teachings they purport to believe in or preach to others. You see it weaponized. You see it used as a way to launch hate at people, sometimes gay and trans people as well, obviously. And
no shit.
I realized that I had been judging God by people. The fact that I didn't feel necessarily welcome or at home in a church, I had this misconception that.
And here we go. I had not feel at home or welcome in a church. So here is where we are going. We're starting to go off road, because she is now saying that like, oh no, all that hate, all that the bad stuff, people are going to ask, how can you be trans and Christian when so many trans people or so many people use the Bible as justification to target and like harass and even threaten to kill trans people? I should know. Yeah, just take a gander back through my YouTube playlist if you don't know what I'm talking about. And so now here's the part where she's going to be like, okay, but what if we just went off road a little bit? Huh? What if we just ditch the people who are interpreting the gospel based on like, at least some foundation of understanding? And what if I just like kind of picked and choose the stuff I liked and wanted? And it's like, but Blaire, that's not actual Christianity. Like, I can call myself a Buddhist. Doesn't make it true. If I'm just reading, like, I can read a couple quotes from the Buddha on a fucking quote calendar in one of those calendar stores that pops up until January. If I hold those quotes near and dear to my heart, it still doesn't make me a Buddhist. You understand? Like it's this. There's just no real barrier to entry to call yourself a Christian, I think, is the biggest problem.
And I'll speak to the gay and trans thing right now, because obviously that's a part of this, right? And by the way, it's only a part of this because unlike other people whose, sins or whose conditions.
Is she gonna blame like radical leftists?
There's a lot of people out there
We'll see.
Cheating on their wives, autographing bombs that get sent off to the Middle East to kill children who call themselves Christians. A lot of people who, where they may be contradicting the Bible in their personal life, they have the cover of it not showing or, coming up front. I'm coming to you with all my cards on deck, right? And I've seen so many gay and trans people hold this resentment because some of them have been abused by the church, abused by religious people in their family. A lot of them, as children and as adults are told that they cannot be gay and, have a relationship with Jesus, for which I have to really emphasize that and say, that's the thing that has really drawn me to Christianity, is that it really truly is about a personal relationship with God. And I never understood that. I saw it as this legalistic, Here's all the list of rules you have to follow for God.
Chat!
And don't get me wrong, there are rules. However, Jesus over and over emphasized the relationship aspect between every person and God.
What did I say?
And he never excluded anybody.
What
In
did
fact,
I
there are so
say?
many wonderful passages where he makes it very clear, such as Galatians 3:28, which states that there is neither male nor female, for you all are one in Jesus Christ. Now, does that mean, we're all non-binary? Obviously not. The lens at which you look.
Oh, okay, but you gotta throw the MBs under the bus. Okay, bitch, I see. God, like, what did I say? What did I say? I think somebody mentioned something in the chats on being like, this is her way of trying to distance herself from bigotry or trying to make some kind of turn or I think, yeah, sure, there might be a genuine emotional journey happening here. Maybe Blaire White it would be a fascinating person to turn slightly to the left, because she is somebody who is constantly advocated, much, honestly, much like Destiny did before his turn, against like SJWs, and like she's very much taken the libs of TikTok tip of, we're going to call out all these crazy blue-haired college commie tankies, whatever, but we're also going to hold them up as this monolith of what the left is in America, which is obviously not true. But on the same tip, she has had to constantly deal with the cognitive dissonance of being prominently trans, being vocal about it, talking about it, and then constantly dealing with harassment from the ideological side that she ascribes to most. I do think there's probably some kind of soul searching that's been happening with the current trend of people who are starting to distance themselves, or at least their image of Trump, their vision of the Trump worldview has started to fracture their I guess their confidence, their faith in that movement. I think there are going to be people who will be going through a soul searching, and maybe it's just a complete coincidence that this is happening, as there is also this massive vibe shift underway, kind of against this more reactionary conservatism. But I personally don't think so. And by the way, this is not me saying that like, oh, Blaire White's going to be based, or she's going to really, come out as a great ally, because I honestly think she is too stuck in her ways. She is too kind of insulated by her wealth and privilege to, actually have these honest conversations with other people in the community. And like, I think she is too Brianna Wu-pilled from the right rather than a vague left like Brianna. But Domain says, now what I studied the last 2 years, that LGBT conservatives are say they are angry left LGBTs make minority to their personality, but they talk more about that as them. Yes. I mean, because it's what people want to hear from them. Like when people go to that kind of audience that they're being welcomed in, like they make it their personality. They're like, I'm the based trans girl, or I'm like, fucking the black conservative or something. What they're going, or what people go to them for, like, there might be, I've unfortunately had to watch like Fresh and Fit lately, and what a nightmare, because I've been researching Destiny. Destiny's done a lot of stuff on Myron Gaines' podcast. And somebody like Myron Gaines, I am sure there are black people in the community, black men, who go to him for advice, they see things the same, etc. But when you have somebody who makes their political identity tie it into identity politics, there's a difference between like a Myron Gaines and I forget the other dude, the dude who called himself a comedian but was never fucking funny, who's another like prominent black conservative. The difference between somebody like Myron Gaines is Myron Gaines has a built-in audience of other people from within the black community, whereas other people are usually trying to appeal to a wider conservative demographic. Whereas it's not just, there are going to be black people talking to other black people about issues that affect like a black community predominantly, or things that those black communities are more familiar with. It is people like Terrence. Yes, Terrence. Thank you very much. like the thing for Terrence is that, and Candace Owens does this too, where they will play to the white conservative perception of a quote unquote a good one, right? Which is to say that, like, you know, and Blaire White has done the same thing for trans people, where they will be able to go and listen, and Blaire White, just like Terrence, would, it's this kind of like space where they feel like they get to go up and feel insulated from their own communities, but they don't really need that because they will get all of this institutional support from conservative movements. But they can sit there and, as a trans person, or as a black person, or as a, you know, a person of color, or as a woman, or like all of these different little niche groups, conservatives fucking love their identity politics, because then they get to go to these sources. They get to go to people like Blaire White to hear about trans issues, and then get to feel confident walking away that they have the correct viewpoint because it came from somebody in that group. Where the reality is that they're just repeating the things that conservatives want to hear. They are just repeating the same talking points on fucking, like, that they get from libs of TikTok, and, you know, oh, you can't trans kids and all of this shit. Like, it's just the same stuff through a different lens, but the utility that people from these out groups, from these identity groups have, is that they lend a justification. They lend a justification and almost a mascot quality, like to being quote unquote one of the good ones. And yeah, it was Terrence K. Williams. You got it. Thank you.
If you can be a serial killer on death row and find God, for which there are many pastors who work with people on death row and try to save their souls. If God is available to all those people,
again, and I know it's not an intentional thing, but she's bringing up a great example now after I had already talked about people, of course, accepting God or having a religious experience at a point where they are more like, they are already susceptible to these ideas. And there is not a single better example of that than people on death row facing the reality of the end of their impending mortality. There's one of my favorite Iron Maiden songs, and you know, fans in the chat will know, Hallowed Be Thy Name, which is such a wonderfully written piece of music. It's so, I could do a whole fucking treatise on why it's so good. But there's an amazing moment where, because it's all about a prisoner being sent to execution. And the lyrics kind of start out, they're talking tough to themselves. It's an internal monologue that is happening as this person is being brought out to a courtyard to be hung. And there's this moment where he talks about, as I'm, you know, walking out to the courtyard, somebody cries from their cell, God be with you. If there's a God, why does he let me die? And it goes from that, like, kind of like, I don't need this God shit. But as it progresses through the rest of the song, it becomes so much more frantic and becomes so much more emotionally fraught as this person comes closer and closer to death. And it's, you know, it's the old saying, there are no atheists in a foxhole, where it's like, on a technical level, you can, actually, well, that's not true. But it's a saying for a reason, is that, like, when you're in a high pressure situation like this, you're goddamn, like, somebody praying for you is, you're not going to be like, no, please don't pray for me.
I know for a fact God is available to me. And how do I know that? Because I met God, because I had that personal transformational experience, that supernatural experience, like I said. And it's just been so positive in my
Grodon, thank you very much for 100, and have a good rest of your night. Somebody said, I feel like you're being a dick if you tell someone not to pray for you. I tell people to do that all the time, but it's because a lot of people, so it's two different things. One, if I was in an actual foxhole and somebody said, hey, I'm going to say a prayer for you, like, yeah, sure, I don't care. I've had Muslim people pray for me. I've had indigenous people pray for me. Like, there is something to being, even if I don't necessarily believe in it. There was a moment in the documentary I did in LA where there was somebody from a local indigenous tribe who was, I don't know the term, I guess anointing or kind of giving a blessing to members of the crowd, and they did that with me. And there is like that was a powerful moment for me. And it's not because I felt, like a spirit come into me, or I felt like, oh, I have spirit armor now, or like it wasn't anything supernatural, but it was that feeling of this shared moment of community between people. Now that is a very different kind of prayer than when people say, bless your soul, I'll pray for you. You just don't know what it's going to be like in the future, but I'll pray for you. Oh, bless your pea-picking heart. You know what? I will pray for you. Angling that towards a specific brand of person, then yes, I am. Because we've all known, ask a Texan. Like, go have a Texan tell you something and then say, bless your heart, and see how they fucking react. Because it's very backhanded. It's that streak of just like backhanded. It's love the sinner, hate the sin type shit. Where it's just like if you are going to genuinely pray for me, yeah, sure, it is dickish to be like, no, I don't actually I don't fucking believe in Sky Daddy. Blah. But if it is that kind of passive aggressive bullshit, like I literally have told people, fucking save your breath. Like, no, because at a certain point it's like, no, you're not actually praying for me. You are not praying for somebody to be benefited. You're not praying for somebody's success. What you're praying for is that person will come around to your worldview through, some kind of coercive force.
Has it been difficult to find a church to be a part of / call home? I wouldn't say difficult. I would just say that I have not felt called to go to church. And
Chat, what the fuck did I say like an hour ago of ranting? What did I say? Did I say or did I not say that she would be like, yeah, I just haven't quite found a church? That she's had a personal journey. I hate being inside of these people's heads. It's one of those things where I can sit back and be like, damn, I'm pretty good. But then I'm like, okay, but what am I good at? I am good at knowing what these people are going to say to excuse their behavior. Is that really a great skill? Is it really just
the only way to be a Christian is going to church every Sunday? And that is not biblical. The Bible and Jesus talks about how the church isn't here, right? The church is in the body of people who believe in Jesus and are aligned with Jesus. That's actually emphasized over and over and over again. And Jesus was it's not about the establishment. It's not about a hierarchy of people to judge you or people you have to go through to get to God. You have a one-way connection, a one-way line to Jesus if you so seek it. I feel very comfortable saying that I'm a Christian. I'm not a churchgoer. I was a self-identified Christian and found God. I never used that language. I never believed that. I never believed there was a mistake with my birth. I believed that my path was my path. And
again, there's this idea at its core of, okay, I've been told this other stuff and these doctrinal differences are things that you absolutely can, and in many cases I think should disagree with or debate, or at the very least look into what doctrinal and biblical scholars say about something. Because I find, it's one of the things I find, one of the reasons I find religion so fascinating is the scholarship behind it. The idea that, these things are passed down. These things that are fundamental to our society. It's inarguable that religion is foundational to Western society. Whether that's a good thing or not, completely different story. But that's not really a point you can argue. What's fascinating to me is the way that we will accept that things have changed over times in terms of political structures and stuff. But then you will also have this constant officiation that's happening on how much of religion has changed, how much has the Bible changed, as it was mistranslated, it was retranslated, it's translated into this, and this word got changed from the original Hebrew into the Greek, and like all of that shit. Love that. That is so fascinating to learn about, to hear about. I could listen to people go on lectures about that shit for days. And when you reckon with this kind of thing, is that, yeah, you know, we go back to the hate church, go back to any of the streams I did where they would just, they did this thing and it drives me fucking crazy. It's why I can't watch any more NIFB stuff. Because they will take one verse and then flip to from Old Testament to New Testament to one of the fucking epistles and be like, and as you see, this thing from Song of Solomon, they're talking about it again, like in, you know, Galatians, Ephesians or some shit. And it's like, okay, but those were written hundreds of years apart, translated completely differently, like written by entirely different people from probably multiple hand accounts. So when you get, it's easy to sit down and be like, okay, this is when the Bible was written. This is how it was written. And a lot of people will just hand wave that shit away. But when you get into the actual biblical scholarship of it, it's not that simple of a document to parse. That being said, for her to go, and this is in service of like saying that, yeah, she is kind of right in that there isn't one way to interpret it, but for her to willfully go like, I never agreed to this version of the Bible, is to also ignore the fact that there are so many other interpretations of those things. And to ignore that, I feel, gets at this fundamentally insincere comprehension of Christianity as a religion. If you are joining this religion and your first act is to say, okay, well, I've never believed that. I've never felt that. I feel some of this other stuff. So I'll pay attention to that and have my personal relationship with God. But the rest of it, And it's like, then do you really, Blaire? Do you really?
In my opinion, and what I feel through my relationship with God, like I said, that is all part of God's plan for me. So I never thought that I'm correcting God's plan or I was, correcting a mistake that was made. These are the sorts of things that trans activists put on all trans people, just like how they put on that Christianity is somehow adverse or an enemy. I recognize how easy it is to conflate.
What? How, girl, how do you manage to, in this discussion, how did you manage to still slip in like, nah, these other transes are fucking crazy ass dum-dums who think Christianity hates them?
I've been interested in returning to religion, but feel conflicted due to anti-gay religious right. So again, this is the point that I really want to stress. You've been interested in returning to religion, so you felt that calling like I did, but what's keeping you away from that is people. Like really unpack.
Really, yes, no, I agree that people should absolutely unpack that, because I think the reason that people feel this massive call to religion is this collective. It's what Adorno would call, or is that Horkheimer? No, it was Guy Debord. Sorry, it's what Guy Debord would call a loss of meaning. And, if you watched the video I did on simulacra and nostalgia, and I talk about Baudrillard and all that shit, I think so many people are experiencing these losses of meaning because we are constantly inundated and surrounded by algorithms that just feed us endless degrees of frictionless slop to keep us complacent, while we are still also attached enough to the world around us to see how everything is getting drastically worse, and certainly feel it in between working harder than ever for less money and everything being more expensive, et cetera, et cetera. So in the midst of all of this, I think a lot of people, especially in America, are going through this internal strife and this nascent search for meaning. I think it's also what you get for a lot of people when they've kind of settled into a role in life in their, late 20s, early 30s. And for a lot of people, religion is right there. Like it's kind of easy to go and look at. So again, this idea of it being not to undercut everything she's saying, but the idea that, oh, you felt this call to religion. It's like, yeah, everybody feels a call to a lot of shit right now because everything is fucked up and a lot of people want to know why, but not a lot of people actually want to like sit down and listen to and dig into and possibly reform their entire worldview upon learning all this new information. Religion kind of allows you to sidestep that and go through a quote unquote personal transformation.
That and really ask yourself, how much does that make sense? That I've been feeling called to God and religion, but people have dissuaded me. That's how you know that those are not the same things. People can...
What? How? That's how you know those are not... What? One of the problems I think with Blaire is that sometimes she just says shit that doesn't quite follow. Which, like, I get it. Sometimes I do that too. But girl, don't keep it in the video.
You know, push you away from anything. But the beauty of that is it's not about them. So that's just what I had to realize and kind of mature. I'm not saying you're immature, but I had to really get there, like, intellectually. Like, actually, it doesn't matter what a single person I've ever heard talk about Christianity or how they represented it or how they behaved with it. Not a single one of those examples matters. What matters is, does this do something for me? Am I called to this? Is God real or is he not? Do you ever consider detransitioning so you can be as God intended you to be? So that's an excellent question, and I'm glad you made it because I would have maybe forgot to talk about that. And I have not felt any calling or compulsion to detransition or radically change how I look or any of that, because I realized that, again, to me, the story of Jesus is that he transcended flesh. And what is all of this if not just how I've altered my flesh? Absolutely. So if we want to clock, you know, all of our founding fathers who sat up in wigs and powder and high heels, who, you know, wrote the Constitution, let me know when we do that. Or let me know if that's just aimed at someone like me. Because I'm pretty sure a few lines over it also says no mixed fabrics, and y'all aren't adhering to that. So again, it's all about people and how they feel. And if I'm wrong or you're...
It's not... Like, again, it's fascinating to hear her, like, make these assertions that are technically correct. Like, yeah, it is... The idea of what men and women's clothing is changes throughout time. This is one of the reasons that the hate church and their rules around, like, you know, men shouldn't wear this, and if you're a man, you should have your hair cut short. And I'm doing my best Steven Anderson impression. It's been a minute since I listened to him. Or, you know, women, you shouldn't wear pants, or whatever the fuck they say. And it's like, okay, but, you know, they when they were writing these things, they didn't have capris, you know? Like, there weren't yoga pants in ancient Jerusalem. The idea that these standards should apply even as society has continued to change and evolve and grow, and especially as Blaire astutely points out, like, there was an entire phase, a couple 100 years, where, like, rich and wealthy aristocracy would dress in wear that we kind of consider pretty fucking effeminate now. But then, like, she goes from that, the mind-boggling part is that she goes from that to then be like, yeah, so it's all just kind of vibes-based. And it's like, but no, it's not just vibes-based. Like, there's a balance if you actually want to call yourself a Christian. Otherwise, you're just, like, cosplaying Christianity. When I was growing up, early 2000s, this kind of rhetoric, you did see churches like this, but they were regarded as more like liberal, like woo-woo, whatever goes, you know, love everybody, no brimstone churches. And I find it so fascinating how that is unironically, essentially, the ideology she is talking about. Like, she's representing, like, a Unitarian Universalist church idea of what Christianity is. And at the same time still aligning with authoritarian conservatism. Sure, dude. Like, yeah, fuck it. Why not? Americans don't believe in anything. Like, that's all I can really take away from this.